The bulldozer rental company did get out to the field today and fix that hydraulic line. So I got the entire fence line cleaned up. The entire fence line is cleaned up, and I can walk around the property with zero issue. And so I got about maybe about 50 feet of fence. I got about maybe somewhere between 50 and 100 feet of fence right now that's just completely on the ground, and it does need to be fixed up. But the good part of the property, the good thing about the property is that on the so if we were to take a look at the property as a rectangle, on the left side of the property is the highway. So it's real easy to take a look at that side of the fence because the fence is right there on the highway. So I can take a look at it from the road, and the property on the front or on the front side. So if we were to think about this as a two-dimensional rectangle, the left side of the property is on the highway. The bottom side of the rectangle is on the county road. The right side of the property is where the problems are at. And then the back side of the property, there are two fences on the back side of the property. About 3/4 of that fence belongs to one person, and about 25% belongs to another person. And the person who has that 75% of the fence back there, he's got cattle. The man's got cattle, and so he's got good fence around the backside of the property. So the only real problems that I am having are on the right side of the rectangle and on the back left corner of the field. But other than that, the field is all the fence is all in good shape, and I have a clear cut path around the entire property so that I can walk around the property and check or I can drive my truck around the property and take a look at the fence. Because the whole thing about the fence is that, if you ever can't see a part of your fence, it just kind of it makes it hard to sleep at night. All right, you really want good fences. You don't want bad fences. If you got bad fences on any part of your field, it's going to make it real hard for you to sleep at night. And so tomorrow morning, I got a couple of little spots that I got to clean up. I'm going to get out there real early, and I'm gonna clean up a couple of little spots, and then the truck driver is going to be over there to pick up the dozer, and he's going to move it to a different field for me so that I can get started on the second project. And so the first project, everything's going good. I've got the fence line cleared. I will have to come through the property and herbicide it one time. So I will be herbiciding it here in the fall, probably about next month. I'm getting everything put together so that I herbicide the property, I fertilize the property, I fix the fences, and then I start re-expanding my herd. And I'm going to do everything at the same time effectively. I will be doing everything at the same time. And today, the big thing, I figured I would talk about this because I've been put in a situation. I'm in a situation where I do very well for myself, right? I've always said that money's not an opinion, all right? I don't know where why is there such a massive disconnect for people, when it comes to money? I don't understand why people have such a hard time with money. Money to me is such a simple concept. It's not anything to be like whatever. It's not something that's difficult to understand. All right? Money's not complicated. It is a very simple concept. At the end of the day, it just is what it is. I mean, if you just take a look at your bank account, boom, there it is. I mean, there are things that are worth money that are not cash, and there are ways to appraise these different assets. And the whole thing about cattle, and I thought about this analogy, but when you have an animal that is not raised to a commercial standard, when you have an animal that that still needs to really develop to be considered a commercially viable beef animal. Imagine like you have a rock that is full of gold, but it's at the end of the day it's still a rock that's full of gold, and you're going to have to refine that rock. And once you refine that rock, when you have a gold coin, a 1 ounce gold coin, that 1 ounce gold coin is worth a commodity, a sum of money. And that's effectively a very realistic way to look at the feeder cattle market. It's like you have a bunch of rocks. You have a bunch of rocks that are full of gold, and you've prospected this gold, and you have all these rocks that are full of gold, but the gold has not been extracted from the rocks. All right, so the gold needs to be taken out of the rocks, and the gold needs to be refined into a coin, and that's effectively what I do. I refine I take cattle that are in rough shape. I take sale barn cattle. A lot of these cattle are, it just is what it is, and then I take these cattle and I turn them into a commercially viable animal. All right, I turn them into cattle that are effectively at the commercial standard, and so. That's an interesting way to look at it. I feel like that's a realistic analogy for looking at it. But one of the things that I figured I would talk about today, I'm in a very, in terms of a financial situation, I'm in a very interesting situation. I will probably I will just about triple my balance sheet. I will just about triple my balance sheet within the next 7 or 8 months. I will be tripling the size of my balance sheet. And and the whole thing about it is that even when I do that, it doesn't cost me any money. I've already effectively entered a situation where I generate enough money to where everything costs me nothing, okay? I'm not concerned about the price of anything, all right? Realistically, granted that I'm not talking about doing some massive like sum of drugs where I'm, gonna go and buy some ridiculous thing. Like I'm gonna go shopping at the Gucci store. Granted, I'm not gonna do anything like that. In terms of a realistic perspective, everything costs me nothing. All right, the land costs me nothing. My equipment costs me nothing. My cattle cost me nothing. My grain costs me nothing. Everything effectively costs me nothing, and I am looking to just about triple the size of my balance sheet within the next about the next 7 to 8 months. I will be tripling the size of my balance sheet, and so my whole thing about making money, because I've always said, okay, the thing about money is that money's not an opinion. Okay, it's not an opinion. If you have somebody who makes no money, then you have somebody who makes no money. This is not some debatable thing, all right? And I've always said that it is what it is, okay? It doesn't matter what your opinion is. Money is not an opinion. If you make no money, then you make no money. All right, nobody cares. All right, at the end of the day, it's not an opinion. All right, money is not some debatable thing. And when it comes to money, I make a lot. All right, it just is what it is. And for me to put it into realistic perspectives, everything effectively costs me nothing. Everything costs me nothing. My land costs me nothing. My equipment costs me nothing. I'll be tripling the size of my balance sheet. That's not going to cost me anything. All of this stuff is going to make me money. All of that stuff will make me money. The land will make me money. The cattle will make me money. The equipment will make me money. Everything costs me nothing. All right. Granted that, I invest properly and et cetera, et cetera. And so the whole thing about making money and the idea of investing is that I'm not miserable. All right, I am, having a little bit of a hard week. I would anticipate. I've told myself, I really just got to push myself through this week because it's going to be really hard. I'm bulldozing land. I'm clearing land. I gotta find somebody to fix the fence, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I still gotta, grow the herd and everything, and I still gotta go to my day job and et cetera, and it's kind of rough. And and it's really hot outside, and I just constantly feel like vomiting, and I'm like, it's just for, I've already gotten 2 days through it. I've already gotten through it for 2 days. I just need to suck it up for 5 more days, and then after 5 more days, I will have 250 acres of land that I can farm, and and then I'll be on my merry way. And I should say I gotta just kind of suck it up for about 5 more days. All right. I've been through worse than this. This ain't nothing. I'm just kind of having a rough week. And I'm not here to tell you about my rough week. I'm just saying things are kind of hard right now, but I'm not too concerned about it. I just gotta suck it up for 5 more days, and then I'll get it squared away. And but the whole thing about it is that I'm not miserable. Okay, I'm not miserable. I am, having a little bit of difficulty is good. All right, having some difficulty in your life is a good thing. I have there are times in my life when things are extremely difficult. All right, I'm not gonna whatever about it. I'm not gonna ignore my responsibilities. I'm not gonna run away from my responsibilities. All right, things are kind of rough right now. Suck it up, Buttercup. All right, here in about a week. I've been through worse than this. All right, but when things get miserable, they get pretty miserable pretty fast. And right now I'm in a rough spot, but I'm not too concerned about it. But the thing is that I don't intentionally make myself miserable all the time just so that I can, make, for money. All right. And this is also, ties back to the whole idea of not selling your soul to the devil for money. Because if you sell your soul to the devil for money, you're going to be in a situation where even though you have money, I mean, you'll have to deal with yourself. All right, you'll have to deal with that, and selling your soul to the devil for money is not worth it. All right, it's just not worth it. And the thing about investing money, and from how I see it, all right, from how I see it, I do very well for myself. I make a large amount of money. I do very well for myself. I can effectively buy anything on the entire planet. I'm not concerned about money at all. All right, and the thing about money, about investing, is that investing is not a way of saving money. All right, the reason, from what because when I see these things and I see people talking about money, and there are a lot of people that say that, oh, you should save for your future. You should save for your future. To me, that is wrong. All right, I don't see it like that. And I invest a large amount of money. I invest about 150% of my income. All right, I collect. I'm an asset man. All right, I collect large amounts of assets, and whenever I need, whenever I feel like I need some cash, I just pay myself whatever I need. Okay, so I dump about 150% of the money that I make into assets. And the way that I see it, I see a lot of people talking about investing as a way of saving money for your future, saving money for retirement, and saving money for this and saving money for that. But I don't see it like that at all. All right. I don't see it like that at all. As somebody who invests a large amount of money and does very well for themselves, I make a large amount of money. I do very well for myself. I invest about 150% of my income. I actually do this stuff in real life. I don't see investing as a way of saving money. I see investing as a way of giving myself a raise. It's more like giving myself a raise. That's how I see it. It's like me, I increase the amount of money that I pay myself every single time that I invest capital. That's how I see it. All right, that's how I see it. So, and the whole thing about it is like once you hit a point, and the whole thing about this, like making money with your assets. And realistically, okay, and a very honest way to look at this is like if you were going to look to make $2,000 a month, via your asset, and your asset was producing you a 10% return a year, you'd have that $2,000 a month would be $24,000 a year, and at 10%, you would have to have $240,000 invested. And the big idea of making, and there are ways to do this, right? Like, in terms of like real estate, you could leverage for real estate, and you don't need to, the whole thing about compounding growth, using assets to make returns. If you invested $2,000 a month into the markets. If you invested $2,000 a month into an asset that produced you a 10% return a year, how long would it take for you to have about $200,000, $240,000? It would probably take you about 7 or 8 years, okay? It would probably take you about 7 or 8 years. But in all reality, there is that way of making money. All right, that's the slow and steady way of making money. That, if you're in a situation where you're poor, and you're looking for a slow and steady way of making money, it's a very realistic way to do it. In all honesty, if I'm going to talk about like a situation like mine where you are going to make money via your asset and your asset will produce you enough of a return to legitimately like push you into financial financial freedom, all right? You legitimately, it's just whatever, because at the end of the day, you understand an investment, and your investment is going to make you the money. You really need to look for something that's going to produce you about $5,000 a month, all right? And in all honesty, when we're talking about something like this, I mean, we're talking about, you're probably going to have to make it happen. All right, you will have to make it happen. If you don't make it happen, chances are, that these opportunities are not just floating around all over the place. You're gonna have to make it happen. All right, you're gonna have to buy some kind of and you're gonna have to develop a thorough understanding of an asset, and et cetera, et cetera. You'll have to develop a thorough understanding of an asset. You'll have to understand how to increase the equity valuation of that asset. You'll have to understand how to increase the value of that asset, and you will have to be able to systematically do these things, or you're probably not going to be able to make these returns. All right, honest, that's how I honestly see it. And the whole thing about this is when I talk about these different ideas and I present these different ideas to you, you need to understand that these things that, effectively nobody makes it. Nobody makes it. In terms of my situation, I effectively, I make drastically more money than effectively anybody doing anything. It doesn't matter to me, all right? My income, the thing about the amount of money that I make is I'm compounding upwards at like 7% a month. 5% a month. I will genuinely grow my balance sheet by 300% in the next 8 months. That's the big idea. That's what I'm headed for. It's 250%, something like that. I will grow my balance sheet by almost 250%. If I do poorly, it'll be 200% in the next eight months. 200%. All right, it might even be 250 or 300%. When I take leverage, I'll tell you, I'll discuss the idea of taking leverage and how much I took and et cetera, et cetera. But I'll be growing my balance sheet very rapidly, all right? I will be growing my balance sheet very rapidly, and I make a drastic sum of money. And the thing about this is that if I legitimately felt like buying something, because here's the thing, like if I bought whatever, right? If I paid, whatever, $10,000 a month for some, mini mansion, right? Let's say that I went and I paid myself $10,000 a month for a mansion, right? And and I bought myself a Lamborghini, right? Or whatever, and I bought myself a Lamborghini, and that Lamborghini, let's say I just paid for it. And over the course of a year, I lost $50,000 in equity on it. So we think about this Lamborghini as an expense of $4,000 a month, so $14,000 a month. What am I going to do with a mansion and a Lamborghini, right? I mean, because like when you think about it, it's like instead of me buying the mansion, and instead of me renting a mansion, and instead of me buying myself a Lamborghini, if I bought myself 120 cattle, right? Those 120 cattle, the money will go upwards, right? I've called it the current of money. You want to be in the current of money. You do not want to be fighting the current of money. If you are fighting the current of money, you're paying large amounts of money in taxes. You don't have any kind of an investment strategy. You haven't spoken to an accountant yet. You haven't discussed the ideas of, reducing your tax burdens via investment of assets, with an accountant. I would highly suggest that you do these things. All right. Discuss assets with an accountant and discuss what your tax situation is going to look like if you obtain these assets, right? If you go and you buy yourself a rental property, let's say that you find yourself a rental property and this rental property is kind of, it's just kind of in rough shape, and you figured, well, you can put a 3.5% down on it or whatever, and you can buy this thing and you can fix it up, and you can you'll put $200,000 into this thing and you'll fix it up, and once it's fixed up, you'll put $200,000 into it, but the thing will go up by $275,000 if you fix it up and rent it out. And the current renter or whatever, whatever it may be, you found this thing, then go and talk to your accountant about it, all right? The bank is offering me the loan at this price, or the bank is offering me this loan. The interest on my loan is this. I will take a loan. I will take a loan for $200,000 to fix this property. I've already spoken to the bank about it, and the bank has given me this amortization schedule for the loan. Show it to an accountant. Show it to an accountant, all right? Show it to an accountant. Show it to an accountant that understands your specific investment. Don't just go to a random CPA, all right? Go to a person who understands, who specifically works with your type of investment, and ask them about it, all right? The bank has, I'm looking, I've spoken with the bank, and the bank has pre-approved me for this loan, and this loan, I'm going to take this money and buy myself this property. I found this property and it's kind of in rough shape, but I had it thoroughly inspected, and it turns out that the thing is just needs a good remodel, right? It needs a good remodel. It needs new paint. It needs the roof is damaged. But there's no like termites and there's no foundation damage, but the thing does need some work on it. All right, so, and I've spoken with the bank about it, and they gave me a pre-approval letter, and I'm looking to buy this thing, and the bank will also give me a loan for another 200 grand to fix up my project, and they gave me the amortization schedule. Here is my interest rate. Here is my amortization schedule. Here is how much money I make. And, and when I rent this thing out, I reasonably anticipate that I can even raise the rent by a couple $100s a month, right? And speak to an accountant about it, and then they will tell you what your tax situation looks like. And if they don't tell you what your tax situation looks like, then go and find a different accountant. All right, go and find somebody who knows what they're doing. And a lot of these accountants, particularly when they specifically focus on one type of asset, they will have like a worksheet. And they will just be able to pull it up on their computer, and they'll just type it in real fast and give you a rough idea for what your tax situation looks like, all right? And, you're going to have to make it happen, all right? And, when I talk about these things, I'm not looking to be arrogant about it. I'm not looking to be like a prick about it. I don't know how else to put it other than I'm just telling you about my life. And if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else, all right? Or you can talk to my lawyer about it. You're probably a worthless bum anyway. What does it matter to me? When I talk about my life, and I discuss my life, I don't know how else to put. I'm not being a prick about it. It just is what it is, all right? I do very well for myself. I make a drastic sum of money, all right? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, all right? I don't do some easy thing, all right? It's not like some magical journey, all right? And I've always said that the whole thing about this is that if you want to, money's not an opinion, all right? Money talks, all right? It just is what it is. Well, I don't understand why so many people seem to have a difficult time with money. Money is very simple, all right? I can barely do multiplication and division, and I can still understand money very easily. Money's not confusing to me. It's just a number, all right? Money's not complicated, and at the end of the day, money's just money. It just is what it is. And so, and in terms of a financial, it just is what I do very well for myself. I'm not concerned about money. My financials are going upwards on an exponential trajectory. I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned about money. All right, and my whole situation with this. Like, my whole situation is that I legitimately do not know anybody that even does 10%. I don't know anybody that even does 10%. Not one person. All right? And to put things in perspective, I grew my business by 1,000% in the last 3 years, and I am looking to push my business forward another 1,000% in the next 3 years. That's like my big goal, right? And I figured that, next year I'll probably end up making about $1 million. All right, I'll end up probably making about $1 million. And, if I push my business forward by 1,000%, if I do manage to do it, that would be like me making, I don't even know, but I would do very well for myself. All right, if, I would reasonably anticipate that I make over $1 million net. I net positive over $1 million next year. All right, I will net $1 million next year. That's the big idea. Over $1 million. And I don't know anybody else that I don't know anybody that makes money like me at all. Not even 10%. Talk is, the whole thing about having a bunch of opinions. And this is from what I have seen. If you have a bunch of opinions and you have nothing to show for it, then you're a worthless bum. I guarantee it. You're effectively homeless. And you would probably get further in life if you just kept that worthless BS to yourself. Well, why not actually go out into the world and put in some effort and actually do something, right? And actually get somewhere with your life instead of just having all these worthless opinions, right? Why not? If you're not even doing 10%, you should think about that. All right, the whole idea of 10%, and I expanded this out to a bigger, broader idea, is that as long as you fundamentally, as long as you fundamentally understand that you can put money into something and get all of your money back, and you have something that is retaining value, then that's where you enter the 10%, and that's when you realistically you begin to develop this idea that you can make all of your money back even though you put money into something. And realistically, you should push yourself beyond that and you should start looking to make a positive return. You should start looking to make money on your investment. Make money with your money. All right, and my whole thing about it is that at the end of the day, I actually made it and I actually managed to do it. Why would I care if you're a worthless, pathetic bum loser? Why would I care? Do I want to see that happen to people? No, I don't want to see people. I don't want to be in a world where effectively everybody is a worthless bum loser. I don't want that. I want to see people succeed, right? When you go through these things and you start doing things that are difficult and you start doing these things that are difficult, and granted that you don't ultimately, sell your soul to the devil, and fail and et cetera, the chances are you will just end up becoming a better person because this stuff is so difficult. I mean, it's like, at a certain point, you'll probably just end up finding God, all right? I've always said that I always keep my peace with God about it, all right? I always keep my peace with God. I'm not some malicious person, all right? A lot of this stuff is so difficult that, it will effectively turn you into a better person when you go through these things and you succeed. All right, the cattle business is not some easy business. Making money in general is not easy. Doing well for yourself financially is not some easy thing to do. All right, it's not some easy thing to accomplish. And it is what it is. All right, when it comes down to it. Money's not an opinion, all right? Money talks, money's not an opinion. It's a statement of a fact, all right? And I do very well for myself when it comes to money. But that's how I see investments. Investments are not a way of saving money. Investments are not a way of saving money. Investments are a way of increasing the amount of money that you bring home. All right? They give you a positive return. They increase the amount of money that you bring home. That's the whole idea of an investment, is to increase the amount of money that you bring home. All right? You're not, investing is not a way of saving money. It's a way of increasing the amount of money that you make. All right?